Welcome to the broadcast, my dears, and I must begin by thanking those of you who identified Napoleon on this demi-tasse. I was calling it a sipper, but you told me it's a demi-tasse and that this character is Napoleon. So thank you for informing me. I knew that you'd know, and it just goes to show my lack of prowess when it comes to characters and figures in history, doesn't it, my dear? Went right over the head. Thank you for that. I can come to you for anything. That's the most fabulous thing about having so many fruits in this basket. I can come to you for anything, and it always astonishes me, the expertise that you display. You know, it's no secret. It's no secret that the basketeers that are gathered here in my comment section form the most intelligent, savvy, and reputable forum dwellers on the entire internet, and it has a reputation that precedes it. And nobody tops it. Nobody tops it. Thank you. Well, I told you in the previous broadcast, or was it the one before, in fact, that the king was totally indifferent to Harry's forthcoming visit as to whether or not he saw the boy. And, of course, my whisperers proved to be absolutely correct on every score, as usual. And, oh, wasn't it a tonic to hear a sour tonic, to hear the spokesperson for Montecito pop up with their royal bugle and bugle away, or should I say bugle away, my dear. They bugled away with an absolutely smarting response. They were smarting, trying to be smarties, but failing. The Duke of Sussex, a spokesperson, very gender neutral, told us, in response to the many inquiries and continued speculation on whether or not the Duke will meet with his father while in the UK this week, it unfortunately will not be possible due to His Majesty's full programme. The Duke is of course understanding of his father's diary commitments and various other priorities and hopes to see him soon. Get the hankies at the ready, my dear. Oh, boo-hoo-hoo. Daddy's too busy. Daddy couldn't care less, really, could he? Why would he want to see that treacherous son? Right, I did find the language rather interesting, because we all know that this spokesperson is basically Prince Harold himself. I found it interesting where it says his father's diary of commitments and various other priorities, and hopes to see him soon. I wondered if that was a hint of passive aggressiveness. That's what I got from that. Oh, he's got other priorities. He does too busy to see his son. Could be my imagination, but very strange. But actually, the entire statement was unnecessary, it was unroyal, and it was vulgar. Vulgar, 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 in the extreme. This can't be quarrelled. I'm sorry, my dear. It might fly in Montecito. But, you know, this boy was raised in the confines of Kensington Palace, with the late Queen Elizabeth II as an example. And this is what happens. Pithy little statements emanating from some sort of spokespersonly bugler, simply to tell the world's media that Daddy's too busy. And it's unbelievable, really. And Harry is now, as you know, on kingdom soil, his father's kingdom, incidentally. He walks on the soil of his father's kingdom. And he arrived on Tuesday morning, and he was in meetings connected to Invictus all throughout the day, and already, I realise as I'm recording this, his Invictus gathering is going on, and he's arrived, and he was ushered in and waved to the crowds, and I've got to say they were howling like banshees. What I heard was the howling of banshees. I was listening out for boos, but I only managed to watch it through once before coming to film. I did think that I picked up on a couple, but there was lots of wild howling. As if the crowd that had assembled, if it was a crowd, it might have been 8 or 9 fans, they were howling like banshees, as if they were trying to drown out any possibility of jeers and boos. That's what I got. But what it shows you, my dear, and what it illustrates plainly are the type of people that are enthusiastic about the Harkles. Because who else makes noises like that? Who else makes noises like... Do you know any healthy-minded, well-adjusted adults that turn up to howl like that? Fruit Loops and fruit cakes. But in these meetings yesterday, he was already toddling around and cocking his leg and marking his territory. And he looked very pleased with himself. Very pleased with himself. A hug here, an embrace there, a handshake all over the place. And very hail fellow well met. You know, my dear, very hail fellow well, we've seen past that act now, my dear. We know what's lurking beneath that facade. And, oh, it did make me chuckle, though, because there was a doppelganger. There was a doppelganger at the Met Gala. People thought, well, Meghan hasn't showed up, even though one of the Williams gals is there, but Prince Harry is, because there he was. There he was as a skirt arranger. Isn't it absolutely uncanny? Although this fellow is slightly more handsome than the Duke of Sussex, but from a distance, I can see the connection, and it caused a viral sensation. Of course, Meghan is too busy. She's busy. She's preparing to dazzle Nigeria, isn't she? So we've got that treat coming up over the next few days. Meghan is going to be dazzling Nigeria as she returns to the motherland. But His Majesty arrived at Buckingham Palace today an hour before Prince Harry was due to read at St. Paul's, and the national anthem was observed, and the first garden party since his diagnosis sprang to life. And today's party was an annual celebration of community service. And incidentally, speaking about God Save the King as they sang at the party, I was watching it on YouTube again from Coronation Week. From the coronation, I was looking at that moment again because it's on YouTube, of course. And someone had asked me in the comments if Anne had been seen curtsying for Charles or Camilla, and I couldn't think of any time when she has. You might be able to tell me if she has been seen or captured on video doing curtsy to the current king or queen consort. Because you'd mentioned it in the comments. I couldn't find one, but I did look at the part God Save the King when they are leaving, and oh, I got the chills watching it. I was in tears again every time I look at even just a few seconds of that coronation and the anointing and God Save the King at the end. Blubs, my dear. It all comes out. It all comes out. Who knows what's going on the inside here, my dear, my subconscious, but the emotions just come pouring out. And Anne, by the way, at that time she bowed. She gave a very well performed bow from the head as he walked past. She wasn't in a dress, she was in sort of military garb, wasn't she, at the coronation? So it suited the occasion, but a very firm bow. And it was lovely, and it was so lovely watching the children enjoying it and the audience excited, and then you saw the rest of the congregation doing very deep bows and curtsies as they went along. But we'll talk about curtsies a bit later in the broadcast. I'm getting carried away. But the king looked gorgeous today. He was in greys and baby blues, which suit him so well. And Camilla made a splendid sight as well. Queen Camilla was in white Fiona Clare and a Philip Tracy hat, and she wore a heart-shaped diamond brooch, the one from the late Queen Elizabeth's collection. And I was reading that little Tony Hudgell was due today. You know, our friend Tony, who's also a friend of the Prince and Princess of Wales, and had raised nearly £2 million for Evelina's, and we added a donation to that cause as well, if you remember. Well, he was due today. He was invited, but his family got stuck on the N20 for a couple of hours, and they left a message saying they wouldn't be able to make it. So that was rather sad, but I'm sure he'll get his moment again. But oh, the king and queen looked splendid together today. Truly gorgeous. And across the pond, eagle-eyed social media watchers noticed that Ventura County Balloons out of California, Santa Barb's, offered an image, a single image of a balloon bouquet. Is this what they're called? A balloon bouquet. And it had the number 5, and it had Happy Birthday Archie. And people are putting 2 and 2 together and coming up with all sorts of things and suggesting that this was actually for Prince Archie on his 5th birthday, but I am curious, do you think it was a clever marketing ploy on behalf of Ventura County Balloons, who might not have had anything to do with Prince Archie, or it could have been another Archie Bunker, or it could be pure coincidence, or it could be indiscreet publicity, that they have published this without permission from the Sussexes, or it could be permitted publicity with permission. Oh yes, feel free to show the world exactly what's going on. Interesting. While Harry was in town, having so much time to himself to twiddle his thumbs yesterday, he met with the city financier Guy Monson, who you might remember actually from the unveiling of the Diana statue 2 or 3 years ago, wasn't it? He was there, and he is the chief of an investment fund of 18 billion. 18 billion. Always follows the money, doesn't he, that boy? And he's been strutting around with a black folder under his arm. He's got a black folder under his arm. He is a gentleman of great importance. Pass me a pipe. I can see him at home with a pipe. Not that kind of pipe, my dear. Not the one with a crack in it, but if the cap fits. He's a gentleman of great importance. He's a chap. And he's a prince, an international prince of great renown. And he is also the head of a biracial family. He's married to a celebrated and proud woman of colour. So much so that he is even a gentleman of colour these days. White and red. But his nemesis, Queen Camilla, as patron of the National Literacy Trust, visited Moorland Primary School to open their new Coronation Library, which is the 50th in a series of special primary school libraries that have been transformed over the past year to mark the coronation. And Her Majesty joined an interactive storytelling session with young librarians from primary schools before opening the new library and listening to children's laureate Paulo Coelho read a poem he had written for the occasion. And she watched the school choir performing, and she encouraged reading in a speech, as she always does. And did you notice the children were absolutely starstruck by the Queen? There was a joyful atmosphere, so much enthusiasm. The children were very courteous as well, and they were so happy to see her there in a way that can't be faked. It was totally authentic. And the Queen was toting a new handbag by Moyna in powder pink, and she was wearing peacock print, of which she's very fond. That is how you do peacock, Harry. You don't just do peacocking as you are doing, cocking your lead and peacocking around and todgering here and todgering there. No. Cass asks, that's K-A-S, what happens if something happens to the Princess of Wales? There's no rules about William crowned alone, is there? Yes, some have been curious about this. What was to happen if Catherine was to perish? Perish the thought. And I looked into this. I didn't have the coup on it, but I looked into this. George IV would be the main example. George IV, who was estranged from his wife, Caroline of Brunswick, became estranged from her to the point where she was actually excluded from the coronation. It was full of drama. We've spoken about it before in other broadcasts. But he was crowned alone, to the best of my knowledge, and the other Georges actually had various dramas unfurling around them. George I was divorced by the time that he became king because he had been married to Sophia Dorothea of Celle in Germany. And they had both philandered during the marriage to some degree. He had had his mistresses and she had had her gentlemen. And eventually the marriage was dissolved, but not for the adulteries or unfaithfulness, but because she had abandoned her husband. This is how it was petitioned, and eventually, after much drama, she ended up being imprisoned for 30 years, even with her own father's permission. This was back in Celle in Germany. She was imprisoned until her death, but she was imprisoned in style. She had servants and the whole kit and caboodle, my dear. And as for the king, King George I, he took on a hostess. Isn't it wonderful and charming what they were called? A mistress, a concubine, a hostess. an hostess, my dear. He took on an hostess for the rest of his days who provided him with 3 more children, 3 daughters actually. So, but the point is that he was divorced in 1694 from Sophia Dorothea and was crowned, so they were married for 12 years, and then in October 1714, a couple of decades on at least, he was crowned, and crowned alone, even though he had his hostess on the side. So he has 4. And then also George III, who was a bachelor when he actually became king, the moment he became king, but by the time of his coronation he had married, and we've discussed this before in my broadcast about Queen Charlotte, where I showed you documents that I own, handwritten documents of Queen Charlotte's, or as she was, Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz. But he only married her, if you remember, a couple of weeks before the coronation. So George IV really would be the one to choose if you wanted to show an example of somebody who went through his coronation without a consort at his side. But hopefully, and I'm quite sure, that we will not be seeing that happen when King William V is crowned. The Duke of Sussex might also not be too pleased to be hearing about this, because Buckingham Palace announced that the King is giving his role as Colonel-in-Chief of the Army Air Corps to his devoted son. His devoted son married to his beloved daughter-in-law, the Prince of Wales. This will make Prince William Chief of Prince Harry's old regiment. How'd you like that, my dear? Stick it in your pipe and smoke it. And there is going to be a joint engagement that we can look forward to next week, attended by father and son, to formalise this shift after Charles's 31 years in that very role. And William was on official business at Windsor today. He was busy with investitures, and one of those investitures included a CBE for services to children's education in Uganda, and that one went to Claire von Straubensee. And Claire von Straubensee is a great, great friend of the King's. And all the family are friends with the Waleses and the Sussexes. They share godchildren, this sort of thing. And as you might recall from reading Spare, if you did, then Claire had a son who died in 2002. Another Harry, but he went by the name Henners. He was known as Henners von Straubensee. And Harry told us in Spare that Henners was the only young chap that used to inquire about his mother's death and ask him about that subject. Everybody else sort of tiptoed around it or didn't ask, as young lads are wont to do, But he used to ask about it. But the mother, Claire, is being celebrated today for all the fine work that she does, which is wonderful news. And it must be an emotional day for William as well, to invest her as he did today. Her 2 other sons, Thomas and Charlie, you might recall, were ushers at the Sussex wedding, and Thomas is godfather to Princess Charlotte, and William is godfather to his daughter Mary. And then there is Charlie, who is godfather to Prince Archie of Sussex, and Harry is godfather to his daughter Clover. Pavan Fraser says, please can I say something? I'm an American who has been living in the UK for 35 years. Meghan is the worst example of a Yank. She has absolutely no manners and is uncouth. No one would ask to use someone's lip gloss, or her wanting to hug William and Kate at their very first meeting. I don't know what planet she's on, but I want to make it clear that we Americans are not all like this. She is a disgrace. And I read this out, my dear, because I get this comment quite frequently from my dear American fruits who object to her and want to make it very clear that she's not a representation of Americans. Well, we all know this, my dear. Anybody with a brain knows this. Everybody with a brain knows that there's good and rotten in every basket, whether it's the kingdom or the states. There's good and rotten in every basket. And it was never about a divide between black and white culture. It was never about a divide or a misunderstanding, even between national culture, I don't think. I mean, people point towards an American culture clash within the palace. And I do understand that there would have been differences, as there is, differences between our sense of humour and our language and our culture, and differences like that are rather subtle. Those differences, by the way, certainly didn't seem to get in the way of Autumn Kelly, for example, who became Autumn Phillips. Even though they went on to divorce, she was a fine, upstanding Canadian woman, but, American nevertheless, North American, not British, and she fit in absolutely wonderfully, and she speaks so highly about the royal family. There's an interview I was watching of her on YouTube recently, which was quite in-depth, and she was quite candid and just said that they are so normal. She said, they've been so normal to me. She said they are like any other family. You wash up dishes together, you go around, you have a chat. It's like, she said, they are so welcoming, so lovely, and not at all what anyone would imagine. No sort of nose in the air, grandiosity, none of that, my dear. And so we know what that's about. It's not about those kind of clashes. If it was about a clash of culture, then it was the jarring nature of celebrity culture descending into royalty, and Harry being influenced by that and also wanting it and getting a sniff of it and not realising that royalty are echelons above that sort of nonsense. Echelons above. Trash. It's that culture. It's the culture of narcissism and the culture of ego and egotism. That's what it was all about. Pavant Fraser, my dear. Did you see Princess Beatrice pop up? For those of you here in the kingdom, she was appearing on ITV's This Morning show on a live feed. You might remember that Sarah York appeared on it a few months ago as a sort of guest presenter, a guest host, and she was appearing on top of the Empire State Building, she was, and it was marvellous to hear her giving us the update that Fergie has received an all clear. She said it's all clear with regards to her skin cancer, so her many troubles and health issues from the past year seem to have improved in leaps and bounds. It just goes to show how healing the body can be. And she was there supporting the charity Outward Bound Trust, and she spoke beautifully and very eloquently. I've got to tell you, she's great, and passionately, and she brings us youthful enthusiasm. What is she, late 30s now, I guess, at least, maybe mid-30s, but she has this youthful enthusiasm that I think she'll always have even when she's 95, and a sort of purity, a sort of innocence about her. She really does, that I find quite endearing. You'll have to excuse me, my dear. I've been layering headbands today, as I want to do sometimes, and I rather like having this white one, but it keeps slipping down. Every time I speak to you, it keeps slipping, and I have to keep propping it up, my dear. Levitate, levitate. Expect it'll go again, but what can you do, my dear? I do try. Ruby Tuesday says, River, I think it is so sad that some people don't bow to King Charles and Queen Camilla when they're visiting places. Should those people not be told beforehand to bow? That tickles me. I think it shows disrespect. Everyone bowed to Queen Elizabeth, so they should show the same respect to King Charles. Well, I enjoyed your comment, my dear Ruby Tuesday. I did. So don't think that I'm disrespecting you by saying that I don't agree with you. I don't agree with your premise, my dear, but you gave me a chuckle, so I thank you for that. But no, I don't think that they should be told to bow. I don't think they should be instructed to bow. I do understand and agree with you that it is a sadness that there are fewer and fewer people who would be inclined to bow and curtsy to the King and Queen. But having said that, I have also been thrilled this side of the late Queen's death to see how many do. To see how many do bow and curtsy without any prompting and without any telling. And if you've been watching this broadcast over the last 2 years, and I do bring you footage from, I would say, just about all of the events that the King and Queen attend and host, you will see in the crowd, with the people they meet, the children even, and the watchers, a good majority, I shouldn't say that because I haven't gone around counting numbers, but a very healthy ratio of people decide to bow and curtsy when they are introduced to the king and queen. Especially surprising, you might say, for Queen Camilla. She gets a lot of it. And I think it's wonderful. I'm thrilled at it in this modern age when I really wasn't expecting people to take up on it. And they did. That coronation era worked wonders. It branded home the message to people that they are their majesties. And you say, should people not be told beforehand to bow? Well, we are not North Korea. We are not a dictatorship, my dear. The wonderful thing is that every time you see a bow and a curtsy, it is authentic. It has not been imposed upon these people to do so. They have elected to do so. They are pleased to do so. And anything else, any sort of prompting or telling of what to do would be the sort of propaganda that you see coming out about North Korea. There was some propaganda footage from North Korea this week, some sort of pop video and a pop tune that's been going viral. And it was everyone sort of hugging the leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, and showering him with affection and making a great big play of all their sort of worship for him. I don't really want to start seeing that and imposing it upon people. I think it's more powerful without it, because they're still achieving a lot of that respect. Reid X, R-E-I-D-X, says, Meghan is a simple middle-class chick. That is all. She got really lucky as she knew what Harry was, and she started out in a lie, and it will be something similar to her demise. Finally, as a biracial woman, I find her to be something we do not need to speak for us. Capital letters. And I read that out, Reid X, because you are one of hundreds of thousands of biracial viewers of mine. Black, white, pink, green, apricot. Every colour, from Joseph's amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, my dear. Every colour under the sun has commented to say that they don't want her speaking for them, and behaving as if she is speaking for them. So we hear you. Many voices echo yours and resound, and you are not alone. And I just wanted to finish off with obituaries, an obituaries section. 2 deaths. One was 4 years ago, actually. It was the death of Sir Sterling Moss, who died in 2020. So 4 years later, there was a service of Thanksgiving at Westminster Abbey, and I mention it because the 2 brothers Kent popped up. It was lovely to see them. We had Prince Edward, the Duke of Kent, and also Prince Michael of Kent. Lovely to see them together. Handsome gentlemen both. And this was part of a congregation of 2,000 who were gathered there to celebrate that life of Sir Sterling Moss, who was, if you don't know, a legend of car racing. Oh, and also the Duke of Richmond was in attendance, although he's not a royal duke, but he was there as well. And also Mr. Bean made a cameo. Sterling Moss died when he was aged 90 in 2020 and achieved great fame. I suppose you could say the height of it was actually going back to the 50s, and he was acclaimed as the greatest all-round racer in history. So that was worth a mention because they both looked so smart. And also I wanted to put in a photograph of Prince Michael from the other day at the Royal Windsor Horse Show when he was captured in a carriage, because I thought he looked so dashing and so handsome in green. And the other one that I wanted to pay my little tribute to was Susan Buckner, who I must confess I don't know much about. I know she popped up a lot on American television over the years, and she was rather popular and successful there, but all I know her from and remember her from was as Patty Simcox in Grease, of course. Wonderful, wonderful movie, but we lost her at the age of 72, so she was young. She was still in her autumn season, the last few years of autumn. Hadn't even progressed through to the winter season. But that's the way it goes, that's the way the cookie crumbles. Susan Buckner. Fabulous imagery of her with sort of horn-rimmed type glasses, and a wonderful character from a wonderful movie. So I just wanted to mention that because I'm an old softie. Anyway, I will see you next time, my dear. Thank you for joining me. Please do leave me a nice juicy comment. Let me know your thoughts. And if you enjoyed the show, my tip jar is in the description box. See you next time, my dears. Take care, won't you? And toodle pip.